The Republican Party, guys, has become a showcase of cowardice, a group of politicians who strut around pretending to be tough whilst constantly bowing down to one of the most fragile and insecure figures in modern American political history. And that's Donald Trump, of course. Few embody his pathetic submission more completely than someone like Mike Johnson. Johnson has recently surrendered the authority of Congress, handing it over to Trump like a servant desperate for approval. He'll twist the truth, humiliate himself, and abandon any sense of integrity just to stay in Trump's good graces. We are going to get in all of it today, guys, but before we do, if I could kindly ask you to leave a like on the video, hit that subscribe button because it goes a long way in supporting our work. His recent behaviour, that's Johnson, of course, was yet another embarrassing reminder of, when loyalty at all costs means everything. When reporters asked him about Trump's obvious decline, which anyone who watched his recent 60 Minutes appearance could easily see, Johnson just, he froze. He stumbled through his words, dodged the question more or less, and ultimately fled the press conference rather than defend the indefensible, of course. Now, this latest display, guys, perfectly captures what the modern GOP has become, a hollow shell of a party where fear of offending Trump just outweighs everything. Honesty, courage, or responsibility outweighs everything. Johnson's disingenuous comments about programs like SNAP only add to that hypocrisy. Pretending to care about working Americans whilst, doing Trump's bidding at every turn.
Well, he and I talked about this quite a bit over the weekend, multiple times. The president is desperate for SNAP benefits to flow to the American citizens who desperately rely upon it. He has bent over backwards, as you know, to get the troops paid, to keep WIC funding going. He's found creative solutions. The SNAP situation, as Secretary Rollins and I explained at the press conference on Friday, has legal impediments to that. It was understood, and we got legal advice, and it made sense to me that the contingency fund and SNAP could not be used unless the underlying funds were flowing. As Secretary Rollins relayed to you, this is pretty commonsensical. The contingency fund is an extra, in layman's terms, it's an extra fund that is there, for example, if you have an unexpected natural occurrence like a hurricane or something. And
Donald Trump entered the office boasting that he'd lower grocery prices and make life more affordable for American families, guys. Years later, that hollow promise has absolutely collapsed under the weight of his own failures. Now, instead of, delivering relief or anything similar, Trump is now in the humiliating position of having a judge order him to release food assistance that the government has already funded. Money Congress approved a long time ago. Refusing, to provide it isn't just cruel, guys, it's unlawful. Of course, this fits nearly into the ever-growing list of legal and ethical violations that defined his presidency. Trump hasn't just help families put food on the table. He obviously hasn't. He hasn't made it easier to live or eat. He's made it harder. That's plain and simple. His policies and neglect have pushed more Americans towards hunger and financial strain, especially children, guys. Meanwhile, his loyal mouthpieces like Mike Johnson continue to spew nonsense about programs like SNAP, spreading dishonest talking points that fool no one. This rhetoric, isn't resonating, guys. The public simply isn't buying it anymore. And as they're tired, that's their tried and scared tactics about immigration and healthcare, they're just falling apart. They've been scrambled to invent new lies, often laced with racism and contempt for the poor. One Republican even stooped so low as to mock food assistance recipients with an ugly, get off crack remark. Come on, guys, ignoring that millions of hardworking Americans depend on these benefits to survive. It's the same old cruelty dressed up as a policy, with Trump at the top setting the tone, indifferent, dishonest, and utterly disconnected from the struggles of ordinary people.
The American taxpayers and people who have health insurance have made their costs skyrocket. It is their policies that made that happen. And so instead of reforming it, the Democrats don't reform Obamacare, they want to subsidize it. They want to spend more taxpayer dollars. That, by the way, goes mostly to insurance companies, which makes the cost rise further. That's the Democrats' plan. When they passed Obamacare in 2010, they called it the Affordable Care Act. We know the truth is exactly the opposite. By some estimates, premiums have risen 60% in many categories since they passed that bill into law. Now, the fact is the opposite. Republicans are the ones fighting to save health care.
So let's get this straight, guys. Republicans have spent years fighting tooth and nail against any effort to make healthcare accessible or affordable. They have refused to take part in shaping Obamacare, not because it was flawed, but because they couldn't stomach the idea of ordinary Americans actually receiving care. And now, after deliberately obstructing progress, they've twisted the narrative to blame the Democrats for supposedly excluding them from something they never wanted to improve on in the first place. It's political gaslighting at the guys at its most shameless. Mike Johnson's attempt to spin this are laughably incoherent as well. He's tossing out talking points with no logic behind them, hoping that something just sticks. The reality is simple. Republicans have made it their mission to destroy the healthcare protections and social safety nets, leaving millions vulnerable. And now they're whining that Democrats didn't include them in a saving system that, they've done everything to sabotage in the first place. Johnson and his fellow Trump loyalists aren't just indifferent. They're actively hostile to policies that keep Americans alive and healthy. They've tried to gut food assistance, block healthcare access, and hold essential programs hostage for political leverage and nothing else. Meanwhile, Trump himself is busy funneling wealth upwards. He's going through the roof, pushing massive tax breaks for billionaires, causing up to crypto investors and enriching the same elites who bankroll his companies. And when confronted with question about the shady pardons and financial dealings, both Trump and Johnson retreat into the same cowardly, routine, which is, simply pretending they don't know. It's a grotesque display of corruption and cruelty, guys. A party that caters to the ultra-rich while leaving ordinary Americans to fend for themselves.
Last week, you came here to these mics and you were very critical of Joe Biden's use of the auto pen, his pardons. You said he didn't even know who he was pardoning. But last night on 60 Minutes, President Trump, admitted not knowing he pardoned a crypto billionaire who pleaded guilty to money laundering. Does that also concern you?
I don't know anything about that. I didn't see the interview. You have to ask the president about that. I'm not sure. Yes, ma'am.
Last week on Friday, you said that
Mike Johnson once again proved he's completely out of his depth and apparently out of touch with his own political idol. When asked about Trump's latest 60 Minutes appearance, Johnson sheepishly admitted he didn't even watch it, which is obviously untrue. He did watch it. For someone who treats Trump like, a dear leader, that's almost unthinkable. Isn't blind devotion the entire brand of today's Republican leadership, guys? It is, definitely is. But maybe it's no wonder he avoided it. Anyone who did watch that saw a man visibly struggling, confused, rambling, and clearly not the same person he once was. Even medical professionals have raised alarm bells about Trump's possible health issues, which obviously point towards what looks like a serious decline in his cognitive state. Rather than confront this uncomfortable truth, Johnson chose, as usual, the coward's path. Duck the question, deny reality, and literally flee the room when pressed for answers. So it's become the perfect metaphor for modern GOP, guys. A party so enslaved to Trump's ego that its leaders can't even acknowledge what's right in front of them. They'd rather run away than face the reality that their so-called strongman looks weaker and more unfit by the day.
Maybe they won't punish us. Maybe it won't affect turnout in our states in these elections. Maybe after tomorrow they'll come to their common senses again and do the right thing. We certainly pray that is true, and Republicans will be on the job every single day, serving our constituents, helping guide them through the chaos that the Democrat shutdown has created, and praying that they do the right thing and stop making the American people suffer because of this nonsense. Thank you.
Mike Johnson is nothing short of pitiful, guys. The perfect embodiment of a party that mistakes cowardice for strategy. He and his fellow Republicans seem to think that if they just ignore their scandals, and run from them, run from the tough questions, their problem just will magically disappear. It's the same delusional logic that drives Donald Trump, guys. Deny, deflect, and hope the media looks the other way. And while much of the mainstream press too often lets him, stake by, independent voices aren't fooled, guys. The truth is out there for everyone willing to see it. Trump has built an entire political persona on attacking President Biden's mental fitness, calling him a confused, an unfit person. Yet now, in an almost tragic twist of irony, Trump himself is exhibiting those same worrying signs. Slurred speech, erratic behavior, and an apparent inability to remember key details, including his own pardons. Whether this is a result of his own notorious dishonesty or a genuine cognitive decline is anyone's guess, but either way it's disturbing. When asked to explain, Mike Johnson once again ducked and deflected and fled. Just another act of cowardice in service of a man visibly unraveling. So what's even worse, guys, is that Trump's decline, real or exaggerated, doesn't seem, of slowing down his corruption. If anything, it sharpened his instinct for the grift. Like a con artist he's on autopilot. Trump remains laser focused on whenever there's money to be made, from shady crypto schemes to insider deals which are tied to surveillance technology, private prisons and government contracts. His administration policies seemed less about governing and more about personal profits. Stocks in companies like Palantir and Oracle soared whilst ordinary Americans struggle to afford rent and food. Now, Trump's fortune has ballooned. His donors have grown richer, and his family, particularly his sons, allegedly profited off this chaos. Even as markets crashed, every major decision he's made has been driven by greed, not governance. And when world leaders approached him, it wasn't about diplomacy, it was always about deals, deals, and deals. Foreign officials openly discussed business ventures with his children, blurring the line between statecraft and self-enrichment. Now, this is what defines Trumpism. Corruption, dressed up as populism. Greed disguised as patriotism. The man who promised to drain the swamp has turned it into a luxury resort for himself and his billionaire backers. More Democrats and more Americans need to call out what it is. A betrayal of the public trust on a scale that makes, even Watergate look quaint.
Trump's crypto venture, that they are dealing directly with the people responsible for making U.S. policy in the Middle East. It's just stunning. Literally, the sons of the president and the sons of the Middle East envoy running a crypto venture and then going directly into the Middle East in order to find their first investment. And guess what? Miracle, they found it. MGX, an investment firm backed by the Emirati government at this conference, announced that they had looked at all the crypto companies in the world that they could partner with to invest $2 billion in the crypto exchange Binance, and they selected, wait for it, drum roll, the company run by the sons of the President of the United States and the U.S. Middle East envoy. $2 billion. Now, World Liberty's role in this transaction is not that complicated. It's kind of similar to a bank. MGX, this Emirati firm, deposits $2 billion with the firm and in return receives the stablecoin to be used on these crypto exchanges. The firm holds on to these dollars, invests them, and keeps the profits for themselves. So the Trump-Witkoff company just gets basically a gift of capital. And if they just use that $2 billion to invest in treasury bonds, it would profit around $85 million a year from these investments alone. And the money goes directly to Trump, just directly to Trump. It's literally not complicated. Emiratis, World Liberty Financial, Donald Trump. This isn't 1990s Louisiana. Nobody's hiding it. On World Liberty's website, they say an entity affiliated with Donald J. Trump owns 60% of the equity in the company. And because of this deal, Trump and Witkoff can further capitalize because Trump's stablecoin just became the fifth most valuable stablecoin in the world because of the Emirati investment.
We have to keep shining a light on this, guys. The corruption surrounding Donald Trump and his enablers isn't subtle. It's screaming in plain sight, pretending that both sides are equally guilty is a lazy cop-out that only helps shield the guilty. What we're witnessing isn't normal politics, guys. It's an unprecedented level of self-dealing, dishonesty, and abuse of power. This isn't business as usual. It's a full-blown ethical collapse, and it needs to be called out without an apology and that's how it should be. And as always, guys, I appreciate you staying with me till the end. Please hit that subscribe button, leave a like and comment on the video. Stay focused, stay safe, and I'll see you on the next one.